Greetings, everyone. This is the Hipster Snack, and today I'm doing another Snekflix. Haven't done one of these in a while, huh? This week I got the chance to see Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, and you guys know I love the Ghostbusters. The first two films really are some of my favorite comedies of all time. They hold up to this day. They're still fantastic. And I remember seeing Afterlife, and I was like, you know what? That was a really good, loving send up. I think they did a really good job, and Paul Rudd is always great. So when they announced there was going to be a sequel, I was legit like, okay, this might be good. This might be good. There is a lot that could go right. And of course, there was a lot that could go wrong. And I have deliberately avoided watching reviews or reading reviews until I saw it. Well, I have seen it, and for those who just want a simple yes no answer, it's okay. It's okay ish. It's like a C minus of a film. It's okay. I saw it on a matinee showing and thought, yeah, that was a matinee. That was a matinee or a discount or a double feature. The B feature of, of a double feature. Uh, it was okay. I didn't hate it. I don't think it was a blemish on cinematography, kind of like how I felt about the 2016 attempted relaunch. But it of the what could be considered the four like main Ghostbusters film, it is up and away fourth out of four. Okay, now the longer version of that is it picks up a short time after Afterlife, and it's all in New York City, and there's the original Firehouse HQ, which is super cool. I of course, love the Firehouse. It's classic. It's one of those movie sets that is immediately recognizable, and I'm so happy that so many of the games are embracing it as a location for the player to move around in. So, the main cast is, of course, you got Paul Rudd, and Paul Rudd is all in. He is doing everything in his power to just do his best. He's doing his full. I am here. I'm being this warm, awesome character, and he wants to be that good, nice guy. Paul Rudd is being Paul Rudd. Let's just say that. Paul Rudd is being himself, basically. And opposite him is Carrie Coon as Callie Spengler, the daughter of Egon that we saw in Afterlife. And I'm going to just say they are terribly underutilized. Yeah, they don't actually get to do that much. They're just kind of these slightly awkward, slightly older people who are trying to do their best, and the movie just does not give them enough screen time. They really go underused, and it's really weird to me because the film focuses so much on Phoebe. Suddenly this like coming of age, passing the torch story that like every modern film needs to parrot since Marvel started doing it, and like so they're just kind of there in the background. And this is a franchise that was built on the foundation of three grown men who have been friends for years and had multiple PhDs, and the fourth who joins them because he literally just needs the paycheck. And the older I get, the more I think I respect that dynamic more than the coming of age, passing of the torch story. So Phoebe's whole thing, Phoebe, of course, has her role reprised by McKenna Grace, and she's trying really hard. Like I can tell, like I've seen this kid in so many different things now. She's trying real hard to ape what Harold Ramis was doing with the character of Egon Spengler. The problem is they don't give her anything. Egon could be flat because everyone around him was this huge personality. Well, Phoebe is mostly surrounded by these kids who don't have a whole lot of personality going on. So there's nothing to bounce off of. Like the person she ends up interacting with the most was a ghost character named Melody, played by Emily Allen Lind. And neither of them has a whit of personality between them. I think they're trying to do this kind of sarcastic Marvel quippy quip sense of humor thing, but it doesn't work. Phoebe's doing the flat thing, so she needs a big character like Bill Murray or Dan Aykroyd to bounce off of. In fact, I think Phoebe's best moments in the film is when she's interacting with Dan Aykroyd's character, Ray Stantz, obviously. Um, but like, there's so many. Like, here's the weird thing: this happens in New York, but all the characters, all the side characters from the Oklahoma set in Afterlife are all here. Like, what? Why? Like, what would the movie have been that much worse off without podcast? And like, no, okay, I'm not dissing Logan Kim. Logan Kim as an actor is fine from what I've seen. Perfectly serviceable. Podcast as a character does not need to exist and literally doesn't do anything in this film. Like, his presence seems to be a formality. It seems to be that they had to have him because just everyone, all the kids from Oklahoma are suddenly just chilling out in New York City inexplicably with no real rhyme or reason or explanation proffered. It was actually really frustrating, especially because a good deal of the film revolves around Trevor Spengler, played by Finn Wolfhard. And he's trying, I can tell, just like watching his performance, he is trying really hard to to bring the correct energy to the scene. He's trying so hard, but the script is not letting him. His whole thing is Slimer gets into the attic because all the ghosts break loose. Like, spoiler alert, all the ghosts break loose again. Not the first time, probably won't be the last. And so he's like, he's trying to use the equipment and try to set a trap, and things keep going awry. His whole B plot is basically a Bugs Bunny Elmer Fudd routine with Slimer, and they try to make something new of it, but it's basically just Bill Murray's bit with Slimer in the first film, just again. They don't give him a whole lot to go off of, and it's kind of disappointing. The family togetherness moral is something the movie really, really harps on, and I'm not against it, to be clear. But Ghostbusters as a franchise has never been about that kind of thing. The Ghost Brothers, the Ghostbusters did not view themselves as a family unit or brothers or anything like that. They were friends. They were adults. They were established and had their own personality and interests. And that's what made Ghostbusters as a character comedy totally, totally work. The weird, updated, younger, hip with it Marvel writing characters are really soulless for a movie about ghosts. And in terms of the comedy, I laughed a couple times. I'm not going to say that no jokes worked. That would be too hard. Some jokes do work. A lot of them don't, though. And a big thing that ends up happening is the villain, Goraka. He has this decent bit of backstory, but like the entire build-up for his backstory, they're trying to pace it very much like Gozer's in the first film. In fact, I watched the first film after watching Frozen Empire to kind of see how they matched up, and there was a lot of blow for blows. They were trying really hard to kind of follow a plotline that was really, really reminiscent of the first, just not as good. Because here's the frustrating thing for me, is when Dan Aykroyd was expositing about Gozer in the 1984 Ghostbusters film, it was treated with seriousness and everyone was really focused on what he was saying. And, you know, Bill Murray is there to like, oh, say it in English, genius, to have that comedic levity. That worked because Bill Murray has big stage energy. What happens here instead is, as Dan Aykroyd is contemplating the possibilities about Goraka, they're doing that stupid visual gag. And I don't know, like, this started in the 90s, I think, and has just not gone away. But, like, it's clear the other characters aren't paying attention, and woohoo, it's wacky funny because they're not paying attention, and they're looking and doing other things. And it was frustrating. I'm just like, pay attention to what this man is saying. Like, I could listen to Dan Aykroyd go on about Ghostbusters mythos for hours on end, and I would not lose a word the man said. And like, Goraka could have worked if they built him up and made him a little bit more interesting. There's this whole thing where his horns were torn out of his head, and because he was broken down, he was that much weaker. So like it kind of is like building up, like his horns are going to be this big thing. They're not. He just gets them back, and then like during the film's climax, they rip them off again. And and you know what? Spoiler alert. We're full of spoiler alert here. Just get ready for it, because you know, stop me if you heard this one before, ladies and gentlemen. But Walter Peck, who is now the mayor of New York inexplicably, and yet somehow rode to victory on an anti-Ghostbusters stance. What? That's like the opposite of every other timeline, essentially. And Peck, orders them shut down, and the police seize their gear, and the containment unit is shattered by Garaka. Oh, by the way, the old containment unit was filling up, and so they built this like offsite lab. There's much to do about it, and it looks like it's going somewhere. It doesn't. Like maybe it's because they wanted to sell some new toys and play sets, but like it's really just not that interesting. I'll be honest. I like that idea was addressed. I just think it could have been addressed in a much more interesting and tactile, meaningful feedback kind of way. So, like, Garaka lost his horns, and that makes him weaker. And he was sealed away in this brass sphere, which you see in the trailers for the film. It's all over the place. And this random nobody whose name in the movie is maybe said twice. I needed to look it up on IMDb. Nadim Razmati, played by Kumail Nanjiani. I hope I said that right. Comes out of nowhere, sells Dan Aykroyd the sphere. Dan Aykroyd is, of course, as Ray Stantz is owning the curio shop, so he's super all about it. So he buys it, and they are trying to like figure out a way to get possessed objects to be liberated of their ghost ride-alongs. And so they try to exorcise the sphere. It basically causes all chaos to break loose. Garaka starts having some influence in the world around him and tears open the containment grid in the Ghostbusters basement, which essentially causes almost blow for blow the exact same scene as Peck shutting it off in Ghostbusters 1984. Except this time, we learn Garaka's whole thing was he had this ability that didn't work on people, but would work on ghosts, and he could just mind control ghosts. And that's never really explained. He just can do this. It's his thing. So Garaka, takes all these ghosts, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna build a super army." And there's this whole deal where Garaka's whole thing is ice, hence Frozen Kingdom, Frozen Empire, whatever. I'm confusing this with Jurassic World sequels now. What's the difference? A reboot that wasn't as good as the original. What are the odds? So Nadim learns very suddenly that he's of this long line of warriors called the Fire Master. And again, if this had started being built up earlier in the film, I probably would have been all for it, because Ghostbusters goes into some weird places, especially if you watch the animated series. Like that went into magic and voodoo and all sorts of crazy stuff all the time. So like the whole thing is he basically has pyrokinesis. He can't make fire, but he can manipulate any fires that exist. And we learned this legend of these fire masters who used these magical flames to imprison Garaka in a trap of brass. And they're like, oh, it's like a prototypical, a magical version of a Ghostbuster. And so they're like, oh, well, we can use these same principles. And Phoebe changes out parts on her proton pack that are brass, and is like, oh, this will help. And for some reason, they only do it for hers, and no one else's, even though there's like, at the end of the film, there's like 8 people with proton packs, including like Paul Rudd's character, Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, McKenna Grace herself, obviously, like several, like all their friends. Podcast is there because you got to have podcast, and they're all using the throwers, and he can freeze the proton stream. But like they've modified Phoebe's and no one else's? Why? If you had time to modify one, couldn't you modify a couple others? Like there's a lot of dead air in the climax of the film. Like Garaka is coming for them. They know he's after the containment unit, So like he's obviously going there because it'll be just like the ultimate, step forward for him to make his army if he gets to the containment unit. But there's so much dead air, like these random sketches and like really it's really awkwardly paced. That is like one of my biggest takes against this film is it is awkwardly paced. And I feel like they were trying really hard, maybe too hard, to make the general beats of the film match up with those of Ghostbusters 1984. Like a lot of what happens, like the relationship, I guess you can call it a relationship. There was barely any character chemistry between Phoebe and Melody. Like maybe it's supposed to parallel uh, Bill Murray and Bill Murray's relationship with Sigourney Weaver in the first film. Like I didn't really get a romantic vibe. I heard people like complaining about that because Hollywood being creepy with underage girls. What are the odds? But like neither character had any particular personality to speak of, so I didn't get that vibe. But that's exactly it. You could cut it out. You could have cut out Phoebe's entire friendship with Melody. You could have cut out podcast. You could have cut out Lucky. You could have cut out so many ancillary things, and you would not have had a worse movie for it. And it's frustrating because I see good ideas. If they had introduced the concept of the Fire Master much earlier, they'd done a better job establishing Nadim's character, like have him build up a relationship and a friendship with Ray Stantz, and then the others get involved, and there's these like Fire Masters, and then they're the key to this weird orb thing, and we're researching the weird orb thing, and it could all tie together so much more coherently. Like we we didn't need this new generation of Ghostbusters. And don't get me wrong, like I said, I love Paul Rudd, but it's so unnecessary. And to be fair, there is a Harold Ramis shaped hole in the cast and plot of Ghostbusters Frozen Empires. There's just nothing else that you can be said for that. It's great to see Dan Aykroyd. Bill Murray's in the very last, like, 30 minutes of the film because it's Bill Murray and he doesn't want to do anything. Ernie Hudson still has that fantastic energy. And just seeing him there interacting with Dan Aykroyd just puts a smile on my face. And the thing that I hate is that they keep trying to do this. Oh, we're getting too old for this. And there's even a bit where Dan Aykroyd is like, I don't think this is about our age. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. Because you guys are the Ghostbusters. It's not that I'm saying that these new characters can't grow into their own. I'm not saying that they can't be fun characters, but one, there's so many of them, and two, they barely get any time to develop. This movie spends most of its time either on comedic bits that don't actually expand character or plot, or follow Phoebe's plot line, which is not the more interesting one. By the end of the film, I was just like, okay, get these new guys out of the way and let Dan Aykroyd, tell me some Ghostbusters lore. It was becoming a little bit frustrating. I wanted to like this movie more than I did. It is 2 hours solid. And the most I can say is it was okay and probably would have been better if they chopped about 30, 40 minutes off its runtime or greatly restructured the plot. I think they can save this. If they did a third film in this new era, Ghostbusters, whatever you want to call it, they could fix this. Because the ending leaves off on sequel bait, because of course it does, because every film nowadays does. But the whole thing is like, Garaka is locked in the old containment unit, and now they have the new containment unit, and all the ghosts that they've ever caught from 1984 to now are all free again. So it's their chance to build up these characters and do a better job. My advice, chop down the main cast. If you're gonna have it be a family-focused thing, it needs to be Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Finn Wolfhard, and McKenna Grace. everyone else has got to fall by the wayside. Have Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray and Ernie Hudson there to help guide them and be mentors and help out, especially in the film's climax, because that was a thing that they did well in this film. You have got to let go of these side characters and B plots. They're not necessary, and Ghostbusters does not need to be a Marvel film. Stop treating it like one, and you will do just fine. But in conclusion, it's a C minus. It was okay. I paid for a matinee, and I got a movie worthy of the matinee.